Hello and welcome to this video, and in this video we're going to be having a deeper look at this album, Inner Worlds by the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. This is the third album by the Mark II version of the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. If you want to know more about the history, go and look at the previous video because I'm not going to go on into that now. And it's also the final album by the Mark II MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. It's also the final album by any MAHAVISHNU Orchestra in the 70s, and there's nothing under the MAHAVISHNU name until John McLaughlin reforms a band in the 1980s under that name. Some people don't class that as the proper MAHAVISHNU. I will be looking at that in the next video. But for many people, this is seen as being the sort of final album by the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. Now, as a young MAHAVISHNU fan, this was the last one I got hold of. It was really hard to get hold of this. I can remember taking it home very excited because I finally had another MAHAVISHNU Orchestra album to listen to, and to be honest, I was a little bit let down by this. I think when we look at all the other MAHAVISHNU Orchestra albums, for me personally, they are amongst the best fusion albums ever made, and we're really discussing which one's the most brilliant. With this one, I think we can class this as a flawed album, and I want to get into why I think it's flawed. And because on the surface, it's a damn fine album. On here, we have a pared down version of the Mark II MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. Jean-Luc Ponty and Gail Moran have left, and they've been replaced by Stu Goldberg. Now, Stu Goldberg is an incredible keyboardist in the same vein as a Jan Hammer. So what we have here is, in effect, a more high-powered band. You know, we have something closer to the original MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, you know, and I do take the criticism seriously that, you know, perhaps Mark II did not have a keyboardist like Jan Hammer in. For me personally, that's more than made up by the absolute virtuosity of Jean-Luc Ponty, and I think, for me personally, Jean-Luc Ponty's greatest violin playing was in the Mark II MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. But this is one hell of a band. You know, John McLaughlin on guitar, Narada Michael Walden on drums, Ralph Armstrong on bass, and then Stu Goldberg on keyboards. We really could see this at the time, 1975, 1976, as being, you know, top-end fusion, right? Incredible. So they're incredible players. When you listen to this, this is one of the most beautifully engineered albums you'll ever hear. One of the most incredible drum sounds. You know, it really is a beautiful sounding album. So what is it about it that I think most of us MAHAVISHNU Orchestra fans don't quite class it in the same vein as the other, same quality? Well, I had another listen to it the other day, and I think I noticed a couple of things that I didn't notice when I was so younger. One of them is the lack of John McLaughlin input compositionally. That's one of the things when you look at this that's really, really interesting, is that, and we'll go through this bit by bit, and another thing I think is because of that, the introduction of tunes by other musicians in the band. Now, if we think back to the original MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, there was an argument about composer credit. John McLaughlin kept a tight control over the composer credit, and so we could see this as being his vision, you know, and the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra is his vision, and it really comes out of his, not just the musical fusion of jazz, indie music, rock and all that, but it's also got a spiritual message which he's trying to convey. And I think that story, because the great instrumental bands always need a story, with Weather Report it was the personality of Jaco Pastorius. With the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, it was McLaughlin's personality dressed in white and embodying a sort of spiritual search. And I think a lot of people that couldn't quite follow the music could buy into that. And that, at the time in the early 70s, was a very, very important message. It was very successful, right? And John McLaughlin had control over that. Here, we see that diminishing to somewhat. He has less control over the compositions. He's got less control over the vision. And in this video as we go on, I'm going to try and explain to why I think that is the case. But let's go track by track through it. Right, I'm going to talk about the quality and then talk about this composition and vision thing. Right, so the first track is called All in the Family. It's one of the best tracks on the album. It's like sort of somewhere between the MAHAVISHNU and Santana. We haven't quite got that sound anymore. The violin's not there. You know, there's still got the Indian melodies which have been doubled keyboards and guitar. It opens with a sort of drum introductions, really incredible sound. It's very, very exciting. The band kicks in and we think, oh, this is amazing, this is amazing. But what we have here is a jam. It's a jam where they've overdubbed a melody in over the top. Okay? Towards the end, there's a key change. But suddenly, we're not hearing compositionally what we had on all the other albums, which are these incredibly dense compositions, right? It's in 6/8. There's no weird time signatures. There's none of the signature sort of arpeggiated stuff that you get with MAHAVISHNU. But most importantly, it's a jam. McLaughlin throws a guitar solo in there. For me, his guitar playing on this is not quite in the same league as the guitar playing before. McLaughlin's an incredible guitarist. The guitar playing is incredible. But on the whole, it seems a little tired. The whole thing seems tired for me. But as I said, All in the Family is a fantastic composition. It's then followed by Miles Out. Now, this is the anomaly, because for me, Miles Out is one of the most incredible moments of the MAHAVISHNU. It's obviously an improvisation. It's an improvisation between him and Narada Michael Walden over what sounds like a sequence bass line, and it really does go far out, and it's one of the high points of the MAHAVISHNU. But it's a divider. I've read reviews by people who absolutely can't take that because it is so avant-garde. McLaughlin is pushing the outer limits on the sounds here. On this album, he's using two things: a 360-degree frequency shifter, which is like sort of extreme ring modulation to my ears, and he uses that a lot, which almost like destroys the sound. It puts him into a territory which is similar to sort of overblown free jazz saxophone playing. And he's also using a lot of a guitar synthesis. This is another point that's really important. This is probably the first mainstream album to have guitar synthesis on, and a lot of guitar synthesis. You know, he's grappling with that. There's an argument which we'll get into later when we get onto the next video about the 80s MAHAVISHNU, where we discuss the whole guitar synth thing and how it works on record. So I won't get into that so much, you know, wait for the next video. Right, then we have, following that, a track called In My Life, which is written by Narada Michael Walden and McLaughlin. This is a song. It's got full vocals. It's not the sort of choir vocal, you know, sort of sound that we get on Vision of the Animal Bomb. It's a proper song. It's a very great song. Narada Michael Walden's a great songwriter, as we know, as time goes on, he becomes a producer and an artist in his own right. And it's a great song. Is it the MAHAVISHNU though? And that's, I think, the thing here. That's where the expectation starts to wane. We've had two tracks that aren't very MAHAVISHNU sounding, but at least McLaughlin's really playing on them and they're going for it. And then suddenly we hit In My Life. And then it's followed up by Gita, which is another song. I'm not too sure who wrote that. I think John McLaughlin's written that looking at the credits here. But again, I feel like Narada Michael Walden's played a great part in that. So we have these two songs. What are they doing here? Right, what's actually going on? Is it the record company wanting to see something more commercial from them? Something that they can play on the radio? Well, if that's the case, I would really cannot see these tracks being played on the radio. Is it the MAHAVISHNU sound? No, it's a completely new area we're going into. Now, when I search around, this area is done far better on Narada Michael Walden's first solo album, Garden of Love Light, which is an absolute classic fusion album, but it's something different. That is, it's very orchestral, which this one isn't. It's closer to the sound of Vision of the Emerald Beyond, but it contains R&B pop sensibilities with fusion. Something that Billy Cobham's sort of done in a different way on Spectrum. And I feel that with that lack of compositions from McLaughlin, Narada's coming with his sound. It's a great sound, but under the MAHAVISHNU banner, right, does it necessarily work? We then have a very short experimental guitar synth piece, which is very pretty tune, Morning Calls. Turn over to side 2. We then have Way of the Pilgrim, which is written by Narada Michael Walden. This is like a sort of follow-up to Cosmic Strut. It's closer to the MAHAVISHNU sound, but it's also got a much more sort of commercial, disco-y sound almost. It's a great track. One of the things that I'm going to say here that no one's ever said is when I listen to John McLaughlin's guitar solo on this track, that's one guitar solo that I find I have difficulty with it. He really seems to be meandering on that track. And if you listen to the way he actually finishes off the phrase, it's obviously overdubbed in and he's almost caught out by the track finishing if you hear the last few phrases. That's my take on it. And what that is evidence of for me is these are jams which have been overdubbed over, the solos are overdubbed. I don't think Miles Out is overdubbed. That's an example of a band playing. Here, it doesn't seem to be quite in the zone, right? River of My Heart is a Narada Michael Walden tune. Again, it's another very slow ballady tune. Then we have Planetary Citizen. Now, I absolutely love Planetary Citizen. It's a fantastic track. It's probably my favourite track on this album. Is it a MAHAVISHNU track? No. It's like a funky Earth, Wind and Fire, Ohio Players. It's famous, of course, that the opening Hey Yeah that Ralph Armstrong, shouts was then sampled by Massive Attack and became a huge hit single, one of the greatest hit singles of the last 30 years, Unfinished Sympathy. This track here, in terms of mainstream culture, is probably the most important track in the MAHAVISHNU catalogue. This is the one that's reached the most people. That sound there, that's followed up by Lotus Feet. Now, I think Lotus Feet is one of John McLaughlin's most beautiful compositions. This does sit squarely on a MAHAVISHNU album. It wouldn't be mainstream blow your head off MAHAVISHNU, but then the points where they go more introverted, it definitely has that sound. It's an absolutely beautiful composition, and I love this. But I really prefer the version on Molom. If you check that one, that's much better. But actually, my favourite version of this is the Larry Coryell, John McLaughlin version of Live at the Royal Festival Hall, which I think was made in sort of 1980. That's absolutely beautiful. Just hearing the melody on two guitars sounds absolutely incredible. Of course, this also crops up at the same time on the first Shakti album, although in a completely different form. On the Shakti album, it sounds like we just actually hear just the introduction, and they never really kick into the tune. I think they did play it on that night, but it didn't figure on the album. And we'll get into that in a minute. I think that's quite telling that the One Strong McLaughlin composition also appears on Shakti. Then we have Inner Worlds Part 1 and Part 2. This is great stuff. This is the band really playing. It seems to relate to On the Way Home to Earth off the album before. It's the same sort of structure. It comes out with a sort of guitar and drums over sort of a sequence part this time. You've got sort of Stu Goldman set a sequencer up and they're jamming over that, and then it sort of morphs into this big orchestral part. The only problem with that, again, sorry McLaughlin fans, and I'm the biggest McLaughlin fan, but a lot of the playing on here seems to be meander. It doesn't seem to go anywhere. It's a lot of sounds. It's effects. It's sounds. It's creating textures, and it just goes along like that. The drumming's incredible. So I think my reaction to this album is this: there's some fantastic stuff on here, right? Absolutely brilliant stuff. All in Fan was great. Miles Out is great. In My Life's great. Gita's is great. Lotus Feet's great. Planet Citizen, River My Heart, Where the Pit. It's all great stuff. Is it MAHAVISHNU? Right? I think the vision's gone. I think the MAHAVISHNU thing has gone. Let's have a look back at this cover now, right? So there he is, John McLaughlin. MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, John McLaughlin. Where's the MAHAVISHNU John McLaughlin? Why have they separated his names out? And look at his face here, right? This is a guy, right, where his beliefs, right, where his world has collapsed a little bit. The title Inner Worlds. There's something going on in there. Of course, around about this time, we see a split from McLaughlin and Sri Chinmoy. And I think that's one of the key elements. Without that, can we really have the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra? Is it something that it was essential, that spiritual quest, that plot and that story, was that still there? And if it was there, Was it there in the same way? You know, I think at this time John McLaughlin had got divorced, and his personal life was he's up in arms, or in sort of a little bit of disarray. He's split with the Sri Chimnoy, but also his muse has gone elsewhere. It's gone on to Shakti. Now, I believe Shakti was as great as the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra. And, you know, I may well carry on and just have a look at the Shakti albums, because to me, Shakti was acoustic MAHAVISHNU. I think the fact that his muse is over there, that the plot that is going on in terms of Sri Chimnoy, he's not so, it's not so vital. I'm not saying he's lost his belief. We know John McLaughlin didn't lose his belief. But I think at that time, when he emerges later on, he seems to be wearing the sharp suits. He's in bands which are a lot less wear the spirituality on your sleeve. It's a different thing. I think he's changed. McLaughlin is a great artist. I think that's the thing. I think this was one album too many. I think that if this had come out as a John McLaughlin album without that name on it, okay, we would be thinking of it in a completely different way. And if you think of, in 1978, Electric Guitarist that comes out afterwards, which is a solo album, what we get there is a far more eclectic things going on. And things that, you know, relate to this album, except on Electric Guitarist, we have a ton of very fantastic John McLaughlin compositions. Think about this. This may be one of the few albums in his catalogue that doesn't really feature his composition that much. As I said, the ones that aren't credited to somebody else are basically jams. And I think this is something that hasn't been said about this album. I don't think he had a vision for it. I think they went into the studio with nothing and jammed it out. And it was a bit like, well, Narada, have you got a song? You know, Ralph, have you got a song? And that's the way it worked, you know. The final track, In the World, the big epic at the end, is not written by John McLaughlin, it's written by Stu Goldberg. So out of these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 tracks, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them, nearly half of them, are written by the other members in the band. Now, if we look at the other albums, we have basically, on Between Nothingness and Eternity, we have Sister Andrea, and on Visionary and Beyond, we have Cosmic Struck. So in all the other albums, we only have 2 tunes by other members of the band. The Jan Hammer composition, well, I think Jan Hammer's was actually integral to the MAHAVISHNU sound. So the way he wrote just fitted in. He's part of the sound as well as John McLaughlin. I think that's where the argument was. Narada Michael Walden has got a very signature sound, which is this rhythm and blues and fusion mixed together. He's got incredible pop sensibilities. Anyone who listens to Visual Then Will Be On will know that the hit record on there, the most commercial boppy one, is Cosmic Strut. It does everything the MAHAVISHNU should do, but it's also, you know, very, very catchy. So I think this is a good album. I think this is a great fusion album. You know, you don't ignore it, but it has got its troubles. I have possibly been a little bit harsh to it on this video. We all know that all of us here love the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, and I also love Narada Michael Walden, which I think has come across. And for me personally, his drumming on this is, again, absolutely stellar. He really carries this album for me. It's a Narada Michael Walden album for me, as much as it's a John McLaughlin album. And that's great. Is it the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra? I'm not so sure. At this point, the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra then stops. It ceases to be. I think around about this time, he'd been out on tour with Jeff Beck. He'd seen Jeff Beck's band, which is a much more funky-based band, and I think that had an effect on him as well. I think he's looking around at the fusion scene and seeing what's going on, seeing what's commercial. This is the point where the MAHAVISHNU brand of fusion takes a back seat, and we start to get this much more funkier, more commercial sound of fusion. I don't think John McLaughlin wants to go that way, although the funk actually becomes more and more of an influence as you follow the MAHAVISHNU Orchestra through. They are definitely influenced by the Headhunters and all those other bands that have those hits. The band stops here and it goes into history. What we're going to see next in 1984 is John McLaughlin pull another band together under the banner MAHAVISHNU, right? MAHAVISHNU Orchestra, although on the first album when it comes out it's just MAHAVISHNU. We'll talk about that on the next video, so I hope you're looking forward to that. And again, I'm going to finish up there, so thanks for listening. I'll see you soon, and please like, subscribe and drop a comment in. Thank you very much.